Hi everyone, my name is Saraiji. I'm a student at GEM's First Point School, and this is my research investigating the effect of social media on the well-being of teenagers. So the aims and objectives of my research, I look into how social media affects the happiness levels of teenagers, whether it affects the self-esteem of teenagers, and also the certain design techniques used by softwares and social media industries to keep us fixated on the page and hooked. I also look at the overall positive and negative effects of social media. Importance of this study. During and after the COVID-19 pandemic, teenagers have been using social media excessively, and I wanted to investigate whether this has been leading to negative effects on their self-esteem, on distractions, on their sleep, and I wanted to see how this would in turn affect their daily performances in school. Through this research, I want to raise awareness on the importance of well-being and how we should all be more attentive when using social media and try and avoid using it excessively. So for the secondary research that I cover, I look into social media's correlation with hormonal production. Robinson found that using social media increases dopamine levels in the brain, just like the use of drugs. And fun fact, the only industries that call their customers users are software and drugs. The next thing that I look into are cookies trial, and that's basically the thing that the option that you accept whenever you go on websites. You click accept cookies, and what that does is you're basically granting online advertisers the permission to listen into your conversations, and there has been proof for this. They're gaining audible insights, and the information, those insights that they gained and gather, are used to promote products that are specifically targeted to you, which is a form of direct marketing. I also look into the design techniques, which I mentioned earlier, one of which is like a slot machine. And a psychological explanation for this is called positive intermittent reinforcement, which basically, if we apply that to social media, every time you scroll up on your page, you get that loading icon, and you're not sure what new posts are going to come up. And so you keep doing that, just like the use of slot machines. And this is an unconscious habit that is being implanted into users. For my methodology, I look into what social media generally is, so like the use of cookies, like the use of design techniques. I also cover what others have done in terms of other people's experiments, other people's secondary and primary research. I conduct two forms of primary research, one of which is a questionnaire to look into the perception, look into how teenagers perceive social media. And then I also conduct my own experiment, which I'll cover later on in this presentation. And then I conduct statistical analysis based on the results I gathered from my experiment. So for my experiments methodology, I gathered 38 participants. They were aged 15 to 18. I measured their happiness levels using a happiness quiz, and then they took a social media break, which was 33 hours long. And then after the social media break, I also again measured their happiness levels using the same happiness quiz, and this was for me to identify whether their happiness levels changed after the 33-hour social media break, so whether it increased or decreased or stayed the same. So for my questionnaire, I had 42 participants aged 15 to 18 again, and like I said, I wanted to see how social media is perceived by a teenager, which is the main reason why I conducted this questionnaire. I also wanted to get specific insights into the positive and negative effects of social media towards them. For example, whether they use it as a sense to gain a sense of escapism and entertainment, or whether it negatively affects their daily performances, for example, disrupts their sleep or increases their procrastination levels, etc. So I'm going to cover 3 questions that I did in my questionnaire, one of which is, when do you use social media the most? So the specific time in the day they use social media the most. Most of my participants, 38.8%, said before bed. And based on other research, using social media before bed has been correlated with disrupt sleep. The second most popular answer choice was in school, with almost 22%. And I just want to clarify, there may have been a little bit of sample bias here because my participants were juniors and seniors, they were post-16, they have free lessons in school, so they may have had more of an opportunity to use their phones. I cannot generalize these results to all teenagers in school. And then we've got a few people saying while eating a meal, and this has been positively associated with overindulgence. And then also a few people saying in the morning, so right before they wake up, right after they wake up. The next question I asked my participants was on a scale from 1 to 10, so 5 being the most, 1 being the least, to what extent does social media affect your procrastination levels? And the majority of my participants, 34.4%, so 11 participants stated that social media increases their procrastination levels with a score of 4 out of 5. So we could infer that social media does affect productivity. Other researchers found a positive association between screen time and depressive symptoms among adolescents. Another question I asked my participants within my questionnaire was whether social media makes them feel worse about themselves, so whether it lowers their self-esteem or not. Most of my participants selected the yes option, so the yes all the time, the yes sometimes, and yes most of the time, with only 46.9% of my participants selecting the no option, no, not at all. However, again, my participants, I cannot generalize these findings to all participants, so they're not really representative of all teenagers, since all my participants come from the same school, so there may have, in the same city, there may have been some cultural bias and some sample bias. On to my experiment. For the happiness score, I measured it using a happiness quiz from the Pursuit of Happiness website. The quiz is like a questionnaire, so it gives a score out of 115. The higher the score, the happier you are. Students completed this quiz before and after the social media break. Generally speaking, the average happiness scores of my participants increased by over 100% after the break, the 33-hour social media break. The standard deviation slightly increased along with the minimum and the maximum happiness scores. These are all happiness scores. I conducted a statistical analysis based on my results. I used a 95% confidence interval using a two-tailed t-test, and I got a p-value of 0.00064, which is less than 0.05, meaning that there is a statistically significant difference between the means of happiness scores before and after the social media break. I conducted another two-tailed t-test after I split my results even further between males and females. I compared the means of happiness scores after the experiment between males and females, and I got a p-value of 0.874, which is higher than 0.05, which means that the averages between males and females are insignificant in difference. So I cannot conclude that one sex was happier after the social media break or less happy. To evaluate my experiment, I trusted my participants to not use social media. Also, I used a quiz to test their happiness before and after the social media break. There are other ways to test happiness levels which may be more valid. Also, since the quiz that I used is like a questionnaire, social desirability could have occurred, which is the tendency of an individual to not answer truthfully just so that they can present themselves in the best possible light. Ethical, I ensured my experiment was as ethical as possible. I gave all participants the right to withdraw anytime during the experiment. I also debriefed them, issuing the aims and objectives of the experiment. The duration was only 33 hours. If I increased the duration, this could have led to different results. Individual differences could have occurred within my sample because they were all volunteers. That means that most of them could have had an extroverted personality, for example. They all agreed to take part in this experiment and so may share specific characteristic. So this could have led to sample bias. To conclude, social media negatively affects teenagers' happiness levels. This could affect their daily performances in school, because I did look into how that disrupts their sleep, how that increases distractions, increases procrastinations. So it could be a way for them to escape from their responsibilities that are pretty important during that high school years. And these are evident from my results, my experiment results specifically, as there was a statistically significant difference with the happiness scores before and after the experiments. My results are in correlation with Frinzen and Egermont, Verdin, and Cruz's studies. My advice to everyone watching this, and especially teenagers, is to treat social media with extreme caution. Thank you all so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy.